Most women are taught to be soft before they are taught to be sovereign. They are conditioned to smile before they are encouraged to speak, to be agreeable before being whole. And so, many walk through life as masks, beautiful, accommodating, pleasing masks, built not for their own soul's becoming, but for the comfort of others. But something changes when a woman decides to stop seeking approval and starts seeking herself. Because when a man meets a woman who has done her shadow work, he does not meet a fantasy. He meets fire. He meets mirror. He meets the parts of himself he's spent a lifetime avoiding. She is no longer the fractured girl who twists herself into shapes to be loved. She has walked through the hell of her psyche, sat at the table with her wounds, and fed them understanding instead of shame. She has buried the illusions sold to her by a culture obsessed with palatability, and in their place she has planted something wild, ancient, and unshakable. And when he stands before her, something deep within him begins to tremble, not from fear of her, but from the threat she poses to the persona he's so carefully constructed. The persona that relies on power, control, admiration, the one that cannot exist in the presence of a woman who no longer needs it. This woman does not react. She reflects. She does not perform. She radiates. Her essence is not for rent, it is sovereign territory. She sees his masks because she has burned her own. She hears the echo in his words when they are hollow because she has sat in silence long enough to know the weight of truth. She is not impressed by charm that tries to disguise avoidance. Her body tightens at inauthenticity the way the skin recoils at fire, and she will not flinch when his ego begins to twitch at her boundaries. Because this woman has made peace with aloneness. She has faced the ache of abandonment without begging to be chosen. She has sat in the dark and made it her teacher. So when a man tries to test her with hot and cold games, she doesn't chase. She steps back, not out of fear, but out of clarity. The man who meets her cannot play the same roles he played before, because her energy doesn't invite performance. It invites revelation. And here is the paradox that startles him. He yearns for her, and yet he resists her. Because to be close to her requires death. Death of the false self. Death of the savior complex. Death of the need to dominate, to seduce, to control. She does not need to be saved. She has already resurrected herself. This woman is not impressed by titles nor swayed by status. Her attraction isn't ignited by muscles or money. It responds to depth, to presence, to the man who has done his own descent, the man who has looked into his inner abyss and didn't run, the one who knows the weight of silence, who doesn't interrupt her stillness because he is uncomfortable with it, the man who can witness her rage without shrinking, because he has made peace with his own. And yet, these men are rare. So when the average man meets her, he may feel drawn to her magic but repelled by her magnitude. He may say she is too much, when in truth, she is simply too real, too awake, too unafraid to walk away. You see, a woman who has met her darkness no longer accepts crumbs. She knows her hunger is sacred. She has starved for so long on half-love, on polite gestures, on conditional affection, that now nothing less than truth will do. And truth terrifies the man who lives in fragments. He may call her cold when she no longer overextends. He may label her difficult when she no longer fawns. He may say she's damaged when all she has done is heal in a way he hasn't yet dared to. Because shadow work doesn't make a woman soft. It makes her honest, and the honest woman is the most dangerous of all to a man who survives on illusion. But to the man who is ready, to the man whose soul is tired of the masquerade, her presence is not a threat. It is a doorway. It is the invitation he didn't know he was waiting for. A call back home to himself. Because something ancient awakens in a man when he stands before a woman who is no longer afraid to be alone. He feels it in her gaze, the knowing, the discernment, the softness that no longer bends but anchors. Her silence says what her words never need to. I will not make myself small so you can feel large. And in that moment he realizes he cannot enter her world with performance, only with presence, not with conquest, only with consciousness. So the man stands there, at the edge of something vast, something unknown, and the air around her feels different. It does not wrap itself around his wounds and cater to his insecurities. It demands something more, not more effort, not more charm, but more truth. And truth, for a man unaccustomed to being fully seen, can feel like war. Her energy does not coddle the ego. It summons the soul. She doesn't ask him to become anything other than what he is. But that very invitation is terrifying because it forces him to ask, "What am I?" beneath the noise. He may retreat at first, not because she has harmed him, but because he senses she cannot be deceived. He may ghost, disappear, pull away, not to hurt her, but because somewhere deep within he knows this woman would require the death of every mask I've ever worn. He may test her to see if she'll chase, but she won't. She will remain still, not out of indifference, but because she knows the cost of abandoning herself. She has done it before, and she will never do it again. Not for anyone. There is a sacred fire in a woman who has walked through betrayal and come out intact. A quiet power in the way she no longer bargains for affection. She has stopped auditioning for roles in other people's lives. She has become the author of her own myth. And he can feel it. When he speaks to her, she doesn't lean forward with hunger. She listens with stillness. Her eyes don't search for approval. They read. And what they read is often what he hasn't yet admitted to himself. She can see his wounds, yes, but she will not heal them for him. That is no longer her role. The woman who has done her shadow work has graduated from being the emotional nursemaid of broken masculinity. She no longer makes it her purpose to mend what men refuse to face. She no longer confuses love with labor. Her compassion remains, but her boundaries are now crystalline. She will not stay where she is breadcrumbed. She will not shrink when challenged. She will not tolerate emotional laziness disguised as masculinity. And the man, if he is not ready, will call her intimidating. But what he is truly afraid of is his own unworthiness being reflected back to him. She does not make him feel small. His unresolved self does. To be near her is to feel the tug of evolution, and evolution is never comfortable. He may find himself thinking of her days later, weeks, months, not because she tried to win him, but because she didn't. Not because she gave him everything, but because she gave him nothing that wasn't real. She is unforgettable because she never clung, never begged, never pleaded to be understood. She simply was. And in that being, she introduced him to a new standard of feminine essence, one rooted in sovereignty, not survival. And for the man who is ready, that changes everything, because somewhere deep in his psyche, a recognition stirs. The archetype of the sacred feminine awakens within him, not the girl who worships him, but the woman who reflects him. The one who draws his unconscious to the surface like a mirror to the soul. If he chooses to stay, he must face himself. And that is what few men are prepared for. For most, love has been performance, seduction, strategy. He has been taught to pursue conquest, not communion. And so, when he meets communion, raw, unedited, piercing, it unnerves him. She is not a game. There is no mask to win her, no line to pull her in, no manipulation to anchor her. The only currency that works here is authenticity. So he must ask himself, can I offer my truth, stripped of pride? Can I sit in her presence without trying to dominate it? Can I hold space for her rage, her softness, her clarity, without making it about me? These questions are the doorway. They are the beginning of his descent, not into her, but into himself. Because the woman who has done her shadow work doesn't just want a man. She wants a mirror. She wants a partner who has bled on the floor of his own psyche, who knows what it is to unlearn, to kneel before truth, to break without blaming. She will not accept less, not because she is cruel, but because anything less would desecrate what she has built within. She has paid dearly for her wholeness, not in gold or status or applause, but in silence, in tears, in the long, aching nights where no one came to rescue her from herself, in the confrontation with her own shadows, jealousy, fear, rage, the ache of not being chosen, the shame of being too much or never enough. She faced them not to become desirable, but to become integrated, and integration is a lonely path. It requires the death of the fantasy, the soft delusion that someone else will make you whole. She no longer waits for a man to find her light. She became it. She no longer seeks someone to protect her. She is the protector of her own peace. So when a man in his unintegrated state meets her, he may feel small, not because she belittles him, but because he senses the inner architecture of a woman who no longer bends to be kept. And if he has not done his own descent, he will mistake her stillness for detachment, her discernment for rejection, her clarity for coldness. But what she carries is sobriety, the clarity that only comes from disillusionment, the kind of truth-telling that refuses to romanticize pain or mistake chaos for love. She will not dance with dysfunction just to avoid being alone. That chapter of her life has closed. The woman who has done her shadow work is no longer flattered by attention. She is not impressed by potential. Her nervous system has been retrained to crave peace over passion, depth over drama, consistency over intensity. So when he arrives with emotional turbulence, with ambiguity, with half-offers and conditional love, she does not explode. She evaporates, because nothing wounds her now more than betraying herself again. This woman has come to understand something sacred. Love is not proven in suffering. Loyalty is not tested in how much chaos she can endure. She has stopped worshiping at the altar of almost, of maybe, of one day he'll change. And this terrifies the man who once thrived on being needed more than being known. You see, a woman like this can no longer be used as a mirror for his ideal self. She reflects what is, not what he pretends to be. She sees past the bravado, the curated masculinity, the charm learned from a culture of seduction. She is not seduced. She is summoned by truth, by depth, by alignment. And alignment does not beg. So if he cannot meet her there, she will not scream, plead, or negotiate. She will simply exit. And it is that exit that echoes, because it is not made from pain. It is made from power. The men who lose her rarely understand what they had. They think they were left by a woman too hard to love. But what they lost was a woman who loved so deeply, she once gave everything, until she learned that love without boundaries is just self-sacrifice in disguise. She now loves with wisdom. She knows the difference between a soul connection and a trauma bond, between chemistry and compatibility, between longing and truth. She does not fear her own intensity because she has sat with it in solitude. So when a man tells her she is too much, she does not shrink. She recognizes his limit. And perhaps this is what haunts him most, that she did not collapse without him, that she did not come back begging, that she did not trade her dignity for his approval. She chose herself. And for the man who is still ruled by ego, this is the deepest cut, because it reveals his illusion of control was never real, that his power to withhold love no longer has leverage, that he cannot break a woman who has already broken open and survived. And yet, beneath the resistance, beneath the fear and pride and projection, there is a longing, a hunger not just for her, but for what she represents: freedom, emotional integrity, inner peace. He may not understand it fully, but he feels it. a compass turning, a new standard being etched into his psyche. If he is brave, he will not run from this. He will lean in. He will stop asking how to win her and start asking how to find himself. Because only from that place of wholeness, of self-respect, of grounded masculinity can he ever meet her fully. And that is what she's been waiting for. Not someone to save her, but someone who has saved himself. The man who has saved himself does not arrive with noise. He arrives with presence. He does not try to impress her with grand declarations or dominate the space between them with rehearsed certainty. Instead, he brings silence. Not empty, not avoidant, but anchored. The kind of silence that has weathered storms. The kind that listens deeply, that speaks only when truth demands a voice. This man no longer fears the vastness of her, because he has explored the caverns of his own soul and made peace with what he found. He has mourned the boy he once was, the one who thought love had to be earned through suffering or stoicism or strength alone. He has watched the structures of his false identity crumble, brick by brick, until only essence remained. And now he stands before her, not as a performer, but as a partner. He does not try to fix her emotions. He feels them. He does not rush to respond. He receives. He does not seek to dominate her rhythms. He dances with them because he has found his own. This man no longer needs her to make him feel powerful. He is already rooted in his own sovereignty, and so he does not fear hers. He honors it. He bows to it, not in submission, but in reverence, to her wildness, her clarity, her refusal to be tamed by superficial affection. He meets her boundaries with grace, not resistance, because he knows that boundaries are not walls to keep love out, they are sacred gates to invite real love in. And real love, he now knows, cannot grow in spaces that lack respect, depth, or mutual evolution. The woman who has done her shadow work feels this shift immediately. It's not what he says, it's the absence of pretense. It's the way he looks into her eyes without trying to enter her, but rather to witness her. It's the way he honors her no, without withdrawing love. The way his presence does not demand her openness, but invites it. For the first time, perhaps, she feels the quiet shock of being met, not pursued, not admired, not worshipped, met. And this moves her. Because while she has learned to live without love, she has never stopped longing for truthful love. Not the love that burns hot and fast, only to leave ashes behind, but the kind that builds, that sits with her in the silence between breaths, the stillness between storms. This man does not rescue her from her depth, he joins her in it. He has no interest in perfection. He does not require her to shrink her voice, dim her power, or soften her edges. He wants all of her, the sacred and the scarred, the luminous and the wild, the unfiltered fullness of a woman who has made herself whole. And so, something extraordinary happens. She begins to let go, not of her standards, but of her armor, not because she is trying to please him, but because he has shown he is safe. He has shown that her strength does not intimidate him, and her softness does not tempt him to control. He has shown that his masculinity is not built on dominance, but on devotion, to truth, to growth, to the mutual unveiling that real love demands. Now, the dance begins. Not the old dance of push and pull, not the anxious grasping for validation or the avoidant retreat into silence. This is a new choreography, crafted from presence and power, from intention and inner freedom. There is space here, space for her to expand, space for him to feel, space for both to be messy and magnificent, and still belong. Together they rise, not as halves seeking completion, but as sovereign beings choosing connection, not because they need to, but because they desire to, because they have tasted loneliness and found the wisdom in it, because they have fallen apart and learned how to rebuild, because they know now, love without self-abandonment is not just possible, it is sacred. She does not lose herself in him. She returns to herself through him, and he does not drown in her depths. He discovers his soul there. This is what happens when a man meets a woman who has done her shadow work and chooses to meet her in his own, not as a savior, not as a conqueror, but as a mirror. There is a quiet revolution that takes place in both of them, not the kind that screams for attention or demands fireworks, but the slow, seismic shifting of identities once tethered to pain, the soft undoing of armor, the sacred remembering of who they were before the world told them who to be. Now, she no longer waits for him to prove his love. She can feel it in the way he stays present when she breaks, in the way he doesn't shrink from her anger or her ache, in the way his hands hold her not to possess but to witness, to offer sanctuary, not rescue. He does not compete with her independence. He reveres it because he has nothing to prove. His masculinity is no longer built on winning or earning, but on offering. His truth, his clarity, his devotion to becoming more conscious each day. And she, once a fortress, begins to open, not as a gift to him, but as an act of devotion to herself, because she no longer fears being misunderstood. She no longer fears being too much, too intense, too intuitive, too alive. She has mourned the years spent shrinking to fit someone's comfort zone, and now she moves only in spaces where her fullness is honored. With him, she need not choose between strength and softness. She is both, always, and he does not try to contain either. Together, they become something rare. Two integrated beings who choose not to complete each other, but to reflect each other. Their connection becomes a sacred space, not a distraction from growth, but a catalyst for it. And so, they hold each other accountable, not from control, but from love. They celebrate the shadows that once ruled them, because those shadows have now become teachers, not tyrants. She sees how far she's come, how she no longer falls for men who mirror her wounds, how she no longer romanticizes pain as passion, how she no longer begs for love that costs her her peace. And he, once driven by unconscious hunger, now moves with intention. He no longer seeks in her what he has not found within. He no longer places the burden of healing on her shoulders. He stands beside her, not above, not below, but beside. This is the alchemy of two souls who have made the journey inward. This is the reunion of masculine and feminine, not as roles or expectations, but as energies in equilibrium. Her intuition no longer threatens him. His structure no longer controls her. Together, they do not merely relate, they co-create. There is no pedestal here, no power play, just presence. Just the sacred space of, I see you, and I remain. And for her, perhaps the most profound truth of all begins to blossom, that she was always enough, not because he finally showed up, but because she did, because she stopped waiting, because she turned her gaze inward, because she held her own heart in the darkest hour and whispered, "You are worthy, even now." Now, she loves without losing herself. She speaks without softening the truth. She walks away from what dims her light, not in anger, but in certainty. She no longer asks, "Am I too much?" She asks, "Is this space wide enough for all of me?" And if the answer is no, she leaves without apology, because she has learned that a woman's wholeness is not a threat, it is a threshold, the kind that only the courageous can cross. So, when a man finally meets her and sees her, not as an accessory to his life, but as a sovereign force walking beside him, she does not melt. She chooses. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.